The board. Fake names are used to protect OP. Did you really mean what you said? I asked, glancing across the table at her, the close friend of my wife and, by extension, a good friend to me. What are you referring to, dear? That evening, beside Janie, you mentioned if you were to ever fall for someone else, it might be me. The memory came flooding back. Lori was tethered to a man who consistently let her down, prioritizing others over their shared responsibilities. She discovered yet another betrayal and sought solace from Janie, who was away visiting family. Consequently, I became Lori's confidant. Upon her distress call, I urged her to come over, consulting Janie en route for guidance. Darling, I'm sorry for your struggle. I'll be back tomorrow to help. Meanwhile, lend her an ear. Only offer your perspective if she inquires. Avoid unsolicited advice, she's likely to disregard it. She's just looking to express her feelings. And if she indulges in too much drink, ensure she stays put. I'll be back by 10 to manage from there. Love you. Lori was visibly distressed upon arrival, having already sought refuge in a bottle of wine. I insisted she refrain from drinking any further. Lori, no more drinks tonight. You're already upset, and a hangover will only make things worse. Talk to me. Her story emerged through tears. Married just a year less than us, she suspected his infidelity from the start. She had caught him in the act twice, each time he persuaded her to forgive him. This incident seemed to be the breaking point. His affair had reached out to Lori, claiming pregnancy and demanding money for an abortion, threatening legal action for child support and medical expenses if denied. The woman's message was clear. She sought financial support to avoid further complications and negative exposure. Despite her apology, the damage was evident. She had believed they were separated, misled by his promise of an impending divorce. What are you planning to do? I queried as I handed her the coffee. I'm at a loss. Our bills are piling up, and I can't count on him. If she goes through with the pregnancy, it'll be disastrous for us. I was astounded by her willingness to stay with him and opted for a direct approach. Why not just leave him and let him handle the consequences? I've considered that, but things are more tangled now. I just discovered I'm pregnant. I can't deprive my child of their father, I just can't. What should I do? She broke down in tears once more. Fury toward her husband Ron consumed me, and while she wept, I contemplated drastic measures. I gently encouraged her to dab her face with a damp cloth. Listen, and promise what I'm about to say stays between us. I have some savings. I can cover the costs for her to not go through with the pregnancy. I don't want repayment, and I need your word to never discuss this again. That will address the immediate issue. My tone became firmer, but hear me out completely. Next to Janie, you're the most remarkable woman I know. Kind, caring, radiant. Any man would be lucky to have you. If I weren't with Janie and you were free, I'd pursue you without end. I could easily fall for you. In another life, we'd be a perfect match. I've never been fond of Ron. I attended your wedding only because Janie insisted. I predicted he'd hurt you, noticing his wandering eye even at the wedding. He won't change. He's bound to stray again, especially if he thinks you'll always stay. You're heading towards endless sorrow. But remember, if you ever need support, we're here for you. She cried herself to sleep in my embrace. I carried her to the guest room, covering her with a light blanket. Back in the living room, I poured a drink of straight rye whiskey, reserved for times of deep contemplation or joy. When Janie returned, I silently communicated that Lori was asleep, pressing my fingers to my lips and gesturing towards the guest room. We shared a quiet kiss and brewed some coffee, whispering in the kitchen. How is she doing? She's struggling. How can she keep letting him treat her like that? I whispered. I'm not sure, love. I'll talk to her when she wakes up, though it might not change anything. Lori entered the kitchen, and Janie embraced her, shedding tears once again. Having done what I could, I quietly left the room. Lori stayed with us for 2 days before returning to him. I took care of the clinic bill silently, not mentioning it to Janie. In a sad twist of fate, Lori miscarried 4 months later. She confided in me, burdened with guilt, believing it was a cosmic punishment for her actions. They stayed together nearly 2 more years before Lori decided she'd had enough and initiated a divorce. It took him by surprise, unraveling him completely. Lori had to change her phone number and secure a restraining order. He claimed to have changed, and part of me wanted to believe him, but it was too late. She lived with us for 3 months until she regained her independence. The initial weeks were tough, but gradually, she began to recover. When I returned home one evening to find her cooking, I knew she was getting better. Welcome back. Your other wife is running late, so I've taken over dinner duties. Fancy some wine? She laughed lightly and pecked me on the cheek. Janie arrived later, and we enjoyed a meal together, filled with laughter, reminiscent of better times. She'll be moving out soon, I mentioned as we got ready for bed. Janie cuddled closer, responding, yes, I'll miss her, but it will also be a relief. It's been hard to keep quiet. Janie, expressive as she was, had been keeping her emotions in check while Lori was with us, biting down on pillows to muffle her sounds. In the following weeks, Lori landed a better position that offered more growth opportunities, along with a cozy 1-bedroom apartment nearby. Her departure was bittersweet, but as soon as she drove off, we eagerly made our way to the bedroom, resulting in Janie's voice being raspy the next day. Janie and I were in our 7th year together. She was 29, and I was 30. I began to softly broach the subject of starting a family, but Janie was reluctant to discuss it, unwilling to leave her job. Leaving your job wouldn't be a loss, it would be stepping into a new phase. Motherhood can be incredibly fulfilling. Plus, we're financially comfortable. My financial situation was stable. I held a significant position as a plant manager at the family-owned plastic injection plant. As an only child, I was poised to inherit majority control eventually, though I hoped that wouldn't be anytime soon. The business, started by my grandfather, had been divided between his 2 sons. My father settled down early and was steady, while Uncle Jack led a bachelor's life, often seen with significantly younger companions. My cousin Jack Jr. seemed keen on following in his father's footsteps. Family business meant that prenuptial agreements were mandatory for both me and my cousin, no exceptions. Some tension arose when I was appointed plant manager and my father took a board position. Uncle Jack questioned the decision, but my grandfather had clear reasons. He has a business management degree, and Jack Jr., despite years in college, no degree. Consider Dan's impeccable attendance record since school, with only a few days missed due to an injury. How does Jack Jr. compare? Remember, he's been let go multiple times for not showing up. I chose Dan for his reliability and commitment to our business's success. That ended the discussion. If Jack Jr. still had a role in the company, he might have resigned out of spite. But Uncle Jack's extravagant lifestyle eventually led to serious financial troubles, forcing my grandfather to buy out his stake in the business, settle his debts, and set up a modest trust for him. Grandfather designed the trust funds for us, accessible at 40, but with an incentive for early access based on our earnings, encouraging continued work, particularly for Jack Jr., who was not pleased. Although my salary was substantial, I only dipped into the trust fund for essential expenses and a brief holiday to the Bahamas, hoping to rekindle Janie's spirits. This seemed to work until I mentioned starting a family again. I reached my limit of patience. Janie, you mentioned being okay with starting a family when we got married. What changed? Shouldn't we have talked about this? I could tell she was taken aback by my frustration as she dramatically discarded her contraceptives. Half a year slipped by. I proposed getting medical advice to understand our situation better, but Janie preferred waiting a bit longer. I consented, though with hesitation. Our friend Lori advised us to stay positive, suggesting things would unfold naturally with time. Eventually, I underwent some tests, and everything was normal on my end. The challenge was encouraging Janie to do the same. Meanwhile, Lori invited me out, which led to a surprising conversation. "What's going on, Lori?" I asked, sensing her discomfort. She hesitated, avoiding my gaze. Finally facing me, she revealed, "I'm moving to Atlanta for a new job opportunity, Dan. It's happening quickly. You're one of the few things I'll miss here." I was stunned. Lori had been a constant presence in our lives, and her sudden departure was unexpected. "That's quite sudden, Lori. Does Janie know?" "She'll be sad. You mean a lot to us." My emotions were clear. Under different circumstances, there could have been something more between us. Tears followed, and it was evident that lunch was over. I drove her home, excusing myself from work due to the emotional upheaval. I took her to the park, a place we often visited for concerts, sharing a blanket and wine. It was her refuge, especially when Ron's actions troubled her, watching the playful innocence of children, finding comfort in their joy. Nestled among the trees was a secluded gazebo, locally dubbed the Love Hut, known for its privacy among couples. We headed there. "Lori, what's troubling you?" I inquired, sensing her distress, reminiscent of her pre-divorce days. At the mention of divorce, she broke down again. I offered comfort, reassuring her of her worth and the love she deserved, beyond what Ron provided. She calmed down, then, with a start, confessed, "It's not my divorce that's hurting me, it's yours." Confused, she ran off, leaving me bewildered. Later, by the playground, amidst the laughter of children, she unfolded the painful truth. She had decided to leave town, having outgrown it and the remnants of her life with Ron. Post-divorce, she sought closure, unwittingly stirring Ron's hopes of reconciliation. Her attempt to part ways amicably backfired when a drunken Ron revealed his affair with Janie, shattering my perception of trust and friendship. He spitefully boasted of their betrayal, likening it to a trivial conquest, leaving me to grapple with the revelation and its impact on our lives. I confronted him, accusing him of deceit, and warned him against repeating such claims. He smirked, asserting I'd never catch him because he valued their secret too much. His expression shifted to distress, sensing the end of his chances to affect me. He tried to convince me of his truthfulness, mentioning a discreet physical feature on her, hidden by her hairstyle. He claimed intimate knowledge of her, describing a unique mark, now obscured by a whimsical design she chose. His words hit hard, the details he mentioned aligned with reality. He boasted about their clandestine meetings, timed with routine activities, sharing too much about their escapades. Reflecting on a day when she seemed unsettled, I recalled her evasive response to my teasing about infidelity. The conversation left me uneasy. She became silent as I struggled with the revelations. She revealed more, explaining her deceptive tactics regarding family planning, her aversion to parenthood, and her superficial nature, which we hadn't perceived. She expressed regret, not fully understanding her actions, but felt compelled to disclose them out of love, despite knowing it would alter my perception of her forever. She hoped I would eventually recall our better moments, her love being the reason for her painful confession, and requested to be driven back to her car. I felt completely numb, unable to utter a word. I'm not even sure how I managed to get back to the restaurant. After we parked, we sat in silence for a moment before she exited the car. "Can we hug?" Her voice was filled with sorrow. I stepped out and embraced her firmly, my eyes welling up with tears, too overwhelmed to speak. Eventually, she released me and gently touched my cheek. "Goodbye, Dan. I wish things were different, that I could erase your sorrow." I stood there, watching her car disappear around the bend, taking her out of my life forever. Heartache is aptly named. The pain is piercing and tangible. Anyone who's experienced it knows the feeling all too well. I don't think I even breathed properly in those moments. I made it home at the usual time. Janie was talking about her day, but stopped when she noticed my distraction. "You seem off. You haven't listened to a word I've said. You look like you're in another world. What's on your mind?" In my head, I was fuming over how Janie had betrayed me, her deceit cutting deep, yet these words remained unspoken. I observed her, recognizing I had never really seen past her exterior. Reflecting on our past since my conversation with Lori, I grew frustrated with myself for being blind to her true nature. I forced myself to return to the moment. "I'm sorry, I just heard some upsetting news about someone I care about." She looked slightly anxious, which I secretly hoped for. "Upsetting news? What happened? Is someone hurt?" "It's something serious, and I'm upset you didn't mention it to me." Her face lost color, a sign of her unease. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Please, explain." I gazed at her, a genuine sorrow in my eyes. "Why didn't you inform me about Lori moving to Atlanta? Seeing her might become a rare occasion now. You two chat so frequently. Didn't it cross your mind to mention it? We could have thrown her a farewell party, or even better, spent some quality time together." Sure, I wasn't as close to her as you were, but I still considered her a friend. A mix of relief and astonishment flashed across her face, followed by a momentary look of shock. "Lori, moving to Atlanta. When did this happen?" I couldn't hide my incredulity. "Really? You had no idea?" "She invited me to lunch today to say goodbye. I believe she's already left. She's gone. We haven't spoken for a week. I tried calling her 3 days ago, but only got her voicemail. With her new job, she's often busy, so I didn't think much of it. But she's actually gone." Her expression showed genuine hurt and disbelief. It seemed she hadn't wronged her in any way, at least from what I knew. "This isn't fair. I need to call her immediately." And she did, over and over, growing increasingly distressed. She checked her email and social media, but to no avail. Tears streamed down her face. Why would she leave without telling me? After all the years of friendship, all the shared moments, and she just disappears. What led her to do this? I felt a tear roll down my cheek, though for a different reason. "I'm not sure, dear. She mentioned during lunch that she had met with Ron and something he said seemed to have upset her. Maybe it troubled her so much that she forgot everything else. Now she seemed truly anxious." "Did she share anything about their conversation?" "No, she only mentioned it didn't go well." Despite my frustration, I gave her a comforting hug. "Don't worry. I'm convinced she'll get in touch soon, either by calling or visiting. We aren't even sure she's left yet. Maybe you should visit her apartment tomorrow." She clung to that suggestion. "That must be it. I'll head over first thing in the morning. I need to rest now. See you in the morning." She gave me a weak smile and retired to the bedroom. I remained awake for a few hours longer, nursing my wry, lost in thought. I couldn't shake the need to find out. The entire day Thursday, the concern nagged at me. Others noticed my distraction, and I excused myself, claiming I felt unwell, and left for home. Janie looked surprised to see me early. She was curled up on the sofa, clutching a pillow. Seeing her puzzled expression, I mentioned I wasn't feeling well. "Did you manage to reach her?" I inquired, reading the answer in her expression. "No, and I can't make sense of it. We've been close for 13 years, since our high school days. Why would she ignore me like this?" I couldn't hold back. People usually act this way because of strong feelings, like anger or feeling betrayed. "Is there something you've done that might have upset her deeply, something she would see as a betrayal?" Her guilty expression said it all. "And no, nothing comes to mind." "Well, I'm at a loss then. I'm sure she'll get in touch eventually. Maybe she just needed time to process her feelings." That night, she was unexpectedly passionate. I was already drifting to sleep when I sensed her closeness. I was startled awake and saw her there. Unlike her usual approach, there was no romantic ambience this time, just the starkness of the moment, her silhouette faintly illuminated by the light outside. "Do you mind?" she whispered softly, a hint of vulnerability in her voice, which was unusual for her assertive manner. My heart raced, her beauty and the complex web of emotions drawing me in despite the turmoil of my thoughts. It was the most intense, deeply emotional connection I could ever recall. She was entirely receptive, aligning seamlessly with my every mood and desire. Initially, I considered being rough, letting out my frustration, but my emotions took over. I devoted myself to her satisfaction, guiding her through waves of intense emotion with all my effort. Exhausted, I lay down, and she cuddled into me, breathing heavily. I felt her tears on my chest. "Are you okay, dear?" I asked. Between her tears, she replied, "Yes, yes. I love you so deeply, so much." How had my life turned so complicated that after such a profound moment of closeness with my wife, I doubted every word she said. She fell asleep quickly, her soft snores filling the room as she rested on my chest. I spent the next hour awake, lost in thought, before I finally got up. In the solitude of my den, I nursed a glass of rye until the early hours, letting my tears flow silently. Somehow, I managed to get to work, maintaining a semblance of normalcy. My grandfather, though 71 and not officially working, still visited the plant weekly, his keen observations missing nothing. He noticed my state immediately and demanded a private talk. "Is this about business or something personal?" he asked, cutting to the chase. I attempted to deflect, but he pressed on, insisting on the truth due to his impatience with pretense. He disapproved of my story, having had a personal history with disloyalty in his younger days. He had little tolerance for unfaithfulness, having made tough decisions in the past when faced with it in his own life. "You're going to deal with her decisively, right?" he asked, indicating a need for strong action. "Probably not, it just seems too draining. And before you bring it up, if what you're implying is true, then she's out of the picture. I'm not interested in orchestrating some drama. I'd rather just accept the situation, stick to the prenuptial agreement, and move on." He grunted in response. "It's not the approach I would take, but if it works for you, maybe you should get in touch with your father, see if he can take over for a bit. I'm ahead of you there. He's coming over on Monday. I'll call and update you on how things go." He looked at me intensely. "Make sure you do. And Dan, I'm really sorry. I remember how tough it can be. I had the financial means to employ a private investigator, gather evidence, maybe even set up surveillance. Yet, deep down, I knew I needed to witness it firsthand. On Saturday morning, I shared a simple breakfast with my wife, exchanged a brief kiss, loaded my golf clubs into the SUV, and drove off. After a few blocks, I turned into the church parking lot, circling to the back. The church's basement entrance was well hidden. From there, you could see the parking lot and street unobserved, perfect for someone wanting to stay out of sight. 20 minutes later, her sports car zoomed past. I waited until she was gone, then walked back home. In the spare room upstairs, intended for a future nursery, I sat with the door ajar and listened. Soon, I heard the garage door open and their voices carried up the stairs. "I'm not sure we should keep this up. He's been odd since Lori left. It's strange she didn't say goodbye to me. You don't think she figured it out, do you?" His confident voice filled the air. Lori was annoying at the end, and I might have hinted at something. But she wouldn't tell him. She knows it would crush him. Anyone could see she was smitten with him whenever he was nearby. I remember how he would sneak glances at her years ago, thinking no one noticed. If they weren't so principled, they might have gotten together long before this mess started. Janie was visibly uncomfortable. "Perhaps it's safer to meet at your place for the time being." He exhaled sharply. "Look, there are 4 people from his workplace in my building. How many weekends can we meet before someone gets suspicious? Even a motel would leave a trail, with our vehicle registration logged. No, I'll continue to wait around the corner from my place, hiding until we reach the garage. If anyone sees you, they'll just think you're out for weekend errands. It's worked so far, why change a working plan? Shall we continue this or keep chatting?" He heard her laughter followed by a playful challenge. "Let's race to the bedroom. The slower one gets to put on a show for the winner," she exclaimed, darting toward the stairs. Their footsteps thundered like a stampede. Janie was quicker, reaching the top with a lead. Little did she know that her husband was waiting there. I had positioned a chair on the landing, and it only took a moment for her to freeze in shock at the sight of me. He caught up, attempting to adjust his clothing, then noticed the tension. One step below her, he turned, and his shocked face was priceless. In a panic, he tried to flee, but his loosened trousers betrayed him, tripping him. He stumbled down the stairs. Ignoring her, I reached him first, pulling him up by his hair to the living room. "Stay there and don't move. Janie, come down here, now." My voice boomed. She was still motionless. "Janie, if you're not down here in 5 seconds, I'm coming up to get you, your choice." She hurried down the stairs, and I guided her to sit on the couch next to him. I positioned a chair opposite them. "Anything to say for yourselves?" They both began to speak at once, but I raised my hand and shouted, "Enough." When silence fell, I continued, "Don't bother explaining, Janie. The reasons don't matter, what matters is what happened. You might as well stop hiding your birth control, go back on it. And you, unbelievable. You're just acting according to your character. Here's a piece of advice, leave town. I won't touch you, but I have the means to turn your life here into a nightmare. If you even think of stepping out of line, know that I can make sure everyone knows about it instantly. If you misstep, the authorities will be informed immediately. Consider this a warning, you have 1 week before things start getting difficult." I then faced Janie, retrieving a document from my pocket. "I'm going away for a few days. Here's a copy of our agreement. in case you've misplaced yours. Take what you're entitled to and leave before I return. The lawyer's details are included. Either contact him with your lawyer or just sign the divorce papers and send them back without any fuss. Don't attempt to reach out to me. I won't be interested in anything you have to say." She nodded slowly, looking at the document warily. Turning to the man, I said, "You need to leave now. If I see you before you've left town, don't bother speaking. Expect nothing more than a challenging and unfulfilling existence from here on out. Leave my house immediately." He regained some confidence, thinking he could confront me. But this wasn't about a fair fight, it was about justice for his actions. As he was trying to compose himself and started to speak, I cut him off with a swift and decisive action, leaving him on the ground, shocked and silenced. "That was for what you did to me," I said, delivering a sharp kick, not to cause irreparable harm, but enough to make him gasp for air. "And that was for the torment you caused Lori over the years." I turned to Janie, stern and unyielding. "Don't even think about the car, you forfeited that right with the prenup. You might want to check on him and consider a taxi. You have 3 days, not a second more." With those words, I left, stepping through the front door and into a new chapter of my life. Dealing with foolish people can be exasperating because of their sheer ignorance. Ron, ever the fool, dismissed my warnings. It took him weeks of suffering and moving like an old man to recover. Then, one unfortunate night, he found himself in a bar fight, receiving a punishing blow to the same injured area. The assailant leaned over him and delivered a message from me, promising a relentless pursuit of justice until Ron acknowledged his wrongdoing. Following a hospital stay, he vanished from town. Janie attempted to contest the prenuptial agreement, but my lawyer scoffed, hinting at the financial drain of a prolonged legal battle. He then proposed a settlement, a sum for the years we shared, provided she agreed swiftly. I relinquished the car to her, it was never to my taste, and covered the remaining payments. She accepted the offer and relocated. Our paths crossed occasionally at social events, where she sought conversation, but I kept interactions brief and polite. Time passed, and my social life was lukewarm. On a spur, I reached out to Lori, sending a brief message and my contact details. After a short wait, she responded with her personal email. I poured out my recent life story in a lengthy email to her, touching lightly on the divorce's sting, which she intuitively understood. The conclusion of my message held the most earnest and heartfelt expression I had ever shared. "Lori, I must express my gratitude for your honesty. It was undoubtedly difficult and painful for you, but there's something important I need to convey. I don't harbor any negative feelings towards you. On the contrary, you've earned my profound gratitude and respect. It takes a person of significant integrity to do what you did, especially knowing it could jeopardize a friendship you seem to value. You chose to act in a way you believed was for my benefit, despite the discomfort it caused you. I can't thank you enough. The aftermath brought many changes, and among them, the loss of your companionship was the most challenging for me. Janie was the one I cherished deeply, and I truly loved her, committing to her completely. However, you were becoming the one who understood me at a deeper level. During difficult times, or whenever I needed sensible advice, you were the person I instinctively turned to because I valued your insight more than anyone's. I felt we shared this mutual understanding. Recall those social gatherings we attended, where Janie would be lively and engaging, and Ron would mingle actively. We would always end up sitting somewhere quiet, engaged in deep conversation, sharing thoughts on various topics. They say intellect is the most attractive aspect of a person. By that measure, you are incredibly appealing. Finally expressing this to you is incredibly fulfilling. I will always cherish you for the person you are, and I hope you've met someone who not only admires your outward appearance but also recognizes and values your inner beauty, which is far more striking. It would be wonderful to keep in touch, but I leave that decision to you. Farewell for now, Dan." Lori responds. It's difficult to articulate the rush of emotions I felt upon receiving Dan's brief message, asking for my new email. Part of why I had left was the realization that no one could compare to him, making any new relationship seem lackluster. I had ended my marriage with a man who seemed distant in love, while the one I truly longed for was wed to my closest friend. Accepting my job promotion was a tough decision, yet ultimately, it was the right move for me. Distance from Dan might allow me the space to meet someone new. Learning about Janie's unfaithfulness to him, I felt compelled to inform him, even though it might ruin any possibility of us being together. I can vividly recall his expression when I broke the news to him at a park, surrounded by the playful sounds of children, a stark contrast to our somber mood. I shared my deepest regret about the future we might have had, which now seemed impossible. Leaving him was hard. My belongings were already shipped off, except for what I carried in my car. The initial drive was tear-filled and intense. After the betrayal came to light, I cut ties with Janie, sometimes questioning that decision. Time passed, and work became my solace. I socialized with colleagues and ventured on occasional dates, yet my heart wasn't ready for a new romance. My emotional guard kept me from pursuing anything serious. The day I opened Dan's email at work changed everything. Overwhelmed by old feelings, I rushed to the restroom in tears. My colleagues rallied around me, offering support after inadvertently reading the email, which reignited memories of my past with Dan. Julie noticed Dan's photo in my wallet, sparking a conversation about the unresolved feelings between us. Her insight, along with Carol and Cindy's encouragement, led me to reconsider the possibility of rekindling what we had. Their perspective made me reflect on the past with a hint of hope. The narrative continued through emails, growing deeper and more personal. I hesitated to advance our communication beyond that, fearing the emotional impact of hearing his voice again. OP responds, I was genuinely pleased when she agreed to exchange emails with me. It felt right that we communicated this way, even though part of me longed to hear her voice. Emails provided the space to think and express oneself clearly. I once shared with her a story about two British poets who fell in love through letters, married without ever meeting. Their bond, formed solely through written words, was fascinating yet puzzling. However, the physical distance and lack of personal contact began to frustrate me. I missed the nuances of her presence, her laughter, the animated way she moved, her expressions of annoyance. I subtly suggested visiting her in Atlanta, but she tactfully declined. Just when I was nearing my limit of patience, an unexpected email arrived with the subject, "This is about Lori. Dear Dan, we are Lori's friends and colleagues. She's been downcast, only brightening up when your emails come through. Now, she's worried you might lose interest. She's fallen for you but fears her past is too much to overcome. We believe you can make a difference. Show her that what's behind doesn't define the future. She needs you to take a bold step, or things might not end well. And, please keep this message between us. Julie, Carol, and Cindy." I pondered their words deeply for several days, pausing all communication with Lori. Then, with a clear mind, I crafted what would be my most heartfelt email to her. Lori responds, I was becoming increasingly anxious. Dan had abruptly ceased communicating with me, leaving me to wonder where I had gone wrong. Was it possible that he had come to see our shared history as insurmountable? My friends noticed my distress and tried to comfort me. Then, one day, Carol, Cindy, and Julie received bouquets of roses at work, their smug expressions suggesting they were in on some secret. At least someone's day was brightened. They came to my office one day with lunch in tow. As we laid out the salads on the conference table, Julie nonchalantly inquired if I had heard from Dan. My response was tinged with sorrow. Come on, perk up, Carol encouraged. Maybe there's a message from him you missed. Check now, so we can all see it during lunch, unless it's too private. They persisted until I logged in to check. To my shock, there was a message from Dan. My hands shook as I opened it. My dear Lori, I've been practicing my sweet talk, haven't I? But it's time for some straight talk. We've both been foolish. I love you, and I'm sure you still love me. So, let's face the facts. I'm fed up with only seeing your words on a screen. I want you here, with me. I long to fall asleep with you close to me, to wake up to your face. I want to be near you, to dream of our future, to see life's changes in you. We once said that in a different world, we could be happy. It feels like ages since we last met. But this is our new world. Our past, shared and separate, has shaped this reality. And in my world, it's your love and our shared laughter that color everything. I'll ask you in person too, but will you marry me? I won't take no for an answer. You have 2 days to decide. If you don't come to me, I'll come to you and wait as long as it takes. Let's skip the drama and agree I'm right. Together is our only option. See you soon. Dan. The emotional impact was immediate and intense, reducing 4 adults to tears. Our office, predominantly female, buzzed with the news, and everyone read his heartfelt proposal. Even our boss, returning from lunch, sensed the emotional atmosphere, misty-eyed after reading the email. He hugged me, expressing how much he would miss me, and gave everyone the rest of the day off, recognizing that work was the last thing on our minds. OP responds, I felt a sense of relief after dispatching the email. My focus was on piecing together some new contracts, grappling with the ever-changing costs in my line of work, closely tied to the whims of oil prices. A new supplier's representative was scheduled to visit, replacing the one who had retired. Amidst my paperwork, my secretary's voice came through the intercom. Dan, there's someone here to see you. Can you spare a moment? Of course, let them in, I replied, my eyes still fixed on the fluctuating figures. I barely registered the door opening, engrossed in my calculations, until an unexpected voice broke my concentration. Did you really mean what you said? I looked up, startled. There she was, Lori, looking slimmer and with her hair flowing longer, more stunning than in my memories. In a heartbeat, I was beside her, securing the door behind us. Embracing her, I knew I wouldn't let go this time. My comment, he was way too nice to his ex during the divorce. The way she acted, she deserved at most what the prenup guaranteed. Otherwise, a great lesson.